Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Huda Iqbal, and it is my distinct honor to represent the Art Museum today. We gather here to engage in a profound dialogue centered on the architectural narratives showcased in the MANZAR exhibition. This dialogue will illuminate the complexities of architectural practices in Pakistan, revealing their cultural significance and the intricate stories they convey. We are privileged to be joined by a distinguished panel of experts whose expertise and contributions have significantly shaped the architectural landscape both nationally and internationally. It is with my great respect that I introduce our esteemed panelists, each a luminary in the field of architecture and design. We are honored to welcome Nayar Ali Dada to our panel. An esteemed architect and cultural icon, Nayar Ali Dada has profoundly influenced Pakistan's architectural landscape through visionary projects such as the Alhambra Arts Council and Serena Hotel. His exemplary contributions have been recognized with the nation's highest civilian honors, including the Pride in Performance, Sitara-e-Imtiaz, and Halal-e-Imtiaz, alongside the prestigious Aga Khan Award in Architecture. His dedication to conservation and design excellence has indelibly shaped both Pakistan's heritage and its modern infrastructure. We are privileged to have Kamil Khan Mumtaz. A renowned architect, educator, and conservationist, Kamil Khan Mumtaz has been instrumental in advancing Pakistan's architectural heritage while fostering a climate-responsive, culturally rooted approach to modern design. As the former head of the architecture department at the National College of Arts in Lahore and founder of the Lahore Conservation Society, he has profoundly influenced generations through his extensive body of work, writings, and advocacy, earning accolades such as the Sitara-e-Imtiaz. We are privileged to have Marwi Mazhar as part of today's discussion. Marwi Mazhar is a dynamic spatial advocate whose work bridges urban interventions and heritage projects, currently focusing on the evolving cityscape of Karachi and leading heritage projects in Kyrgyzstan. Her research critically examines the intersection of old and new developments, exploring the social legal dimensions of public spaces and neighborhood-based design practices. We welcome Maria Aslam to the stage. Maria Aslam is an esteemed architectural historian, writer, and environmental activist, recognized as the founder and editor-in-chief of ADA magazine and principal architect at ArcWorks. She leads the Sustainable Design Council in Pakistan and has chaired key professional organizations. A prominent representative of Pakistan in the international arena, Maria is a pivotal voice in architecture and design, with numerous publications and accolades to her name. Lastly, we are delighted to introduce our moderator for the discussion, Sean Anderson. Sean Anderson, former associate curator at MoMA and currently an associate professor at Cornell University, is an architect and scholar with a specialization in African and South Asian architecture. Renowned for curating influential exhibitions including Reconstructions, Architecture and Blackness in America, he has taught global and authored significant works on topics ranging from colonial Eritrean architecture to South Asian ritual sculpture. Currently, he is developing an exhibition and residency program in Fez, Morocco. Today's discussion promises to yield invaluable insight into the architectural narratives woven into the fabric of MANZAR. Let us now turn our attention to our esteemed panelists as they guide us through the intricate architectural landscapes that this exhibition encompasses.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Again, my name is Sean Anderson. Welcome, friends and neighbors in Doha. It's a great pleasure to be here and sitting on this stage with very much luminaries, not only for Pakistani architecture and thinking, but I would argue global architecture and thinking. And that, to a certain extent, is the arc of our conversation today, is how do we center or recenter Pakistan in a global debate around architecture and vice versa? How do we think of critical, crucial ideas of globality, globalization, climate change, etc., and rethink Pakistan. But before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge Her Excellency, Sheikha Mayasa, the curators of this extraordinary exhibition, including Aurélien Lemonnier for architecture, and Catherine Gagné, the director of the Art Mill Museum, who sponsored and created this exhibition as well. I think it's an extraordinary moment to be here in Doha, not only with these fine people, but with all of you, to think about, respond to, and imagine what Pakistan is in architecture and art today. So with that, I wanted to begin just a broad conversation, building on the last conversation around art, that this exceptional exhibition places art and architecture at an equal footing in a museum like this one, and it's very much an effort to reflect that art doesn't come autonomously, as does architecture does not come autonomously. And I wanted to ask perhaps each of you how you might respond to these ideas. That have you been influenced by art? What do you think the artwork that you might have seen in this exhibition or have seen in this exhibition, does it fulfill, respond to, or affect the ways that you have thought about architecture and perhaps the built and unbuilt environment?
Thank you. I believe that we are in a global age and citizens of the globe itself, and in a period where human advancement of last 100, 150, maybe 200 years has been more than 2,000 years of the past. And we have reached the moon and we are going to Mars. And we are in the space age, and we are in the information age, and we are in computer age, and we are traveling towards AI. But with all that remarkable progress, our priorities are, I think, a bit confused, that we have conquered all that. We haven't been able to deal with the cars and mosquitoes. So we need to prioritize our values and things and deal with this. Life, quality of life itself depends on our priorities. And we as architects, we are the part of the band of culprits who are polluting this world with concrete deserts and buildings and designs which are producing dangerous products. And we don't need generals and people studying nuclear science. Designers are good enough to destroy large number of human beings with bad and dangerous designs. So I believe that we should look at this side of humanity, and our contribution cannot be on such a philosophic large scale, though I'd like to be an activist in that line, but I can do nothing because we are powerless against the big giant corporates, the world order, which controls not only the third world countries, it controls the developed countries also. I believe that the endangered species that we are, the two areas which are to be focused with all this great progress are, one is nature and the other is culture. Because with all this remarkable progress, these are two areas which are in danger and which now, luckily, the awareness is there. And we are looking for methods to protect these two areas or to relate our development to nature and to culture. Because these two things are disappearing fast. and the progress is too fast to be stopped, to give respect to these two areas. And we as designers, I think more than creativity, we do need creativity, but more important is sustainability and morality involved in our work. And we have to balance the quality of, if we have to balance the quality of life here, our interest in these protection of these two areas is supreme. And for that, the awareness of importance of heritage is there to balance out the coldness of modern world itself.
Maria, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Nair Saab. I think a very wise beginning to the discussion as to where we are situated today, the humanity itself, a dying species, in conjunction with the technological advancement. However, I would like to reflect back and go back to the MANZAR exhibition. Thank you to all the curators for undertaking such a session of actually including arts and architecture for the very first time from Pakistan. It's a phenomena to actually witness art and architecture in the same realm. However, I've been working on it through the magazine ADA, Architecture, Design and Art, which is rare in the world because not many publications actually look into the same perspectives through the same lens in all the disciplines of the creative industry. The magnitude is immense, what is unfolding at the MANZAR exhibition. Yet, in my own understanding, I feel we have just touched the pinnacle of architecture per se from Pakistan. It's an introduction to architecture, maybe the baby boomers right after partition, when we are trying to create a voice, when we are trying to formulate an understanding of identity, of regionalism, including Islamic voices and taking away from the colonial sectors. So I think there was a whole bunch of things happening around that time, and that is what has been included in the perspective of MANZAR. Architecture is huge, architecture is immense, architecture is understood as to be something which stays for posterity. So in 7+ decades, we have built a nation, we have built a built environment in Pakistan, which is immense in its understanding for one exhibition to actually create a narrative as such. Trust me, because I've been working on 7 decades of Pakistani architecture, which is into print. But just seeing the dynamics of art and architecture and how Sean just opened up the floor as to how both the creatives work together, forming a narrative, forming an ecosystem, forming an art and architecture articulation for a country. I think that is immense in itself. And there are very limited names that you probably see in this particular exhibition. There are many, many more. There are many other generations to come in from, like I said, baby boomers to Generation X to millennials and so on and so forth, and the current generation which is actually practicing in the field. I do like to mention that when we talk about, as was also mentioned in the prior conversation regarding arts, we kind of reverberate between Lahore and Karachi. Pakistan is not just that. Please let us open up the umbrella of Pakistan to various other cities, to various other art articulation and architecture that is happening, or the built environment that is happening, or the city planning that is happening or not happening, is great or has gone wrong. I think all of that needs to be addressed, and I'm sure that we will be taking this conversation further as we move. Thank you.
I think the term that you both used was the word humanity. And I think in our conversations over the past few days, what I've recognized in each of your practices and your thinking is how rooted you are, not only in the human, but the ways in which humanity can be addressed and how you, in your practices, have addressed humanity. And so often we forget that the built environment is designed by us, more or less. And yet we are still at a moment, I think, both in art and architecture, in which questions of indigeneity, of, say, the non-three major cities of Pakistan, as you say, Maria, we are still learning. We're still learning from peoples around the world whose ideas, whose visions, whose cosmovisions, if you will, are very much integral to where we are today and where we can be in the future. So, Kamil Saab, I was wondering if you could talk about your vision of humanity. I know that I watched your film Outside earlier, your interview. Sorry, it's Inside. And you're speaking about, in some sense, that modernity and modernism forgot the human. And much of your work in these past decades has been to readdress or redress the role of the human in the built environment.
Yes, you're quite right. If your opening remarks, you referred to this particular exhibition as bringing art and architecture together. I think this is significant also because architecture is also an art. It is the art of building. And like any other art, its function, I believe, the function and role of art is to make us aware of the real. And so this, whether as artists or as architects, the common connection is that we are responsible. We have that sensitivity to be able to penetrate past the apparent forms to the essential truth and reality behind that underlies these. And that is what I think all of us, and it comes out in the exhibition itself, the value, I think the significance of this wonderful exhibition is that it kind of presents us with a focused version of this larger history. And what this exhibition is it's a narration of the journey from the time of mid-20th century, the creation of Pakistan, which was a sustainable economy, which was actually trade positive. We had surplus earnings. But we had no industry. And that's at the start of our journey, where the one Pakistani rupee was equal to $1. But we wanted to progress and develop and advance and become modern. And it's that journey that we see here that has taken us from that sustainable, zero carbon footprint, prosperous society to $1 equals about 300 rupees now. My city, Lahore, is the most polluted, the worst air quality in the world these last week. My city's river, the Ravi, in terms of industrial pollution, is the most polluted river in the world. So that is the journey that we have come over these 70-odd years. And I think that this exhibition illustrates that journey very well. So it's a journey from tradition to modernism and catastrophe. So my personal journey has been in the reverse. It's desperate, it's hopeless, but I think that's the journey that we have to take. We've got to stop. We're in a hole and we must stop digging. So my personal journey, which again I think is illustrated in this exhibition, is a journey from modernity to tradition. So, and I think that why I'm saying this is precisely because the point you raised just now, it's about humanity. It's no longer about us individuals or separate societies. It is one common destiny of all humanity. What we are faced with is a existential crisis of the whole planet. And so these are huge issues. And I think this is what we need to focus on, to discuss, and maybe this coming together gives us an occasion to think about these issues.
Kamil Saab, you speak of rivers, and if you haven't been out to the Old Palace courtyard, I strongly recommend to see not only the pavilions that have been made there, and I have to acknowledge Yasmin Lari, an architect from whom I've learned a great deal, and I know all of you have as well. But in the central pavilion is a film by Marvi and an associate, no? Called Malap, which means union. And it speaks not only to that degradation, that catastrophic polluting of rivers, but that the spirit of humanity, the spirit of individuals and collectives in Pakistan speak to dreams that I think we all share as a collective. And so, Marvi, I was going to ask you, beyond the dichotomy of tradition and modernity and catastrophe, I'm going to add that now to the mix. In your work as a spatial advocate and as an environmental advocate, do you find that maybe putting the mirror up to this world of catastrophe is going to perhaps inform, affect, or transform perhaps what Nair Saab was talking about this kind of propensity to build and build and build without thinking of the future?
Thank you, Sean. I feel like everything has been said in this last three people who have spoken so well. I'm going to add on and just build upon what Kamil Saab said, that MANZAR is an exhibition that kind of really reflects on the fact that everyone from the disciplines of art, architecture, seems like in constant conversation. They are in conversation of the environment, and that could be like a political environment or an ecological environment. And it seems like as you flow in, as you enter the narrative, it says setting the stage, and you see this map, and then from there, you flow into the area where it says nation building. And then in the corner, you see Meher Afroz's lovely piece on Pakistan and Dhaka. So, it kind of like makes you constantly think about heartbreaks. And then there is this fabulous work, which is in the center. But then, fast forward, I'm going to go where your question makes more sense, is where the politics of land and water is. So constantly, when you are moving through this narrative, you are reminded that all the artists and the architects were in conversation. But what happened in the middle or at the end, where this idea of absolute development took over. Development for what? Development for who becomes a very critical query. And we see massive ruptures in ecological environments. We see in water, we see it in soil, we see it in human and non-human conversations. So the built environment right now is in a very uncertain space, a space which is being constantly witnessed by people who don't have a voice, who are silenced, and yet people like us who are responsible and coming and giving designs constantly from top down are not including the grassroots momentums. So that's where you also see that how artists are responding to the built environment. And when you see a table of like Aurat March posters, and it talks about ecological rights, environmental rights, you architects are reminded that the conversation is breaking somewhere, and it's not coming together. So it's a thought that one needs to constantly be thinking that where are we heading towards?
And in so doing, it's addressing a rupture that is affecting then almost every aspect of society. No? I think what's also astounding in the exhibition is that it, in a sense, with Chugtai and with Aylesworth, for instance, it begins with a map that's not a map and a landscape that is unknown, but it is very present, and that the landscape and the continuities of the landscape of Pakistan is present throughout. And I felt the landscape in a way in much of the work. And this dialogue that you speak of, I think is, in a sense, a radical gesture for an art exhibition that is tracing the arc of modernity to catastrophe. Maybe a beautiful catastrophe if we think of the conclusion of the interior space. But I want to then think about the ways in which each of you speak to Pakistan in your own way. Kamil Saab, I know you look at, say, historical processes, geometries, spaces, conditions. Nair Saab, I know you also are looking and referencing the ways in which these landscapes, both mythic and real, are imagined and built in your work, and then perhaps framed within your work. And to Marvi's point, Arif Hassan and Yasmin also are thinking about people and sociality and the productions of community within all of your work. What would you say, or what do you say, to an emerging architect in Pakistan or in Doha today? What do you feel must be said, must be addressed right now in architecture, the built environment, the landscape, and so forth? Any of you?
About talking to an American architect? I didn't get your, sorry.
If Nair Saab, if you are thinking about MANZAR and thinking about your work and what we've all been talking about today, what would you say to an emerging architect, or a very young architect, or someone who's even thinking about architecture as a vocation in Pakistan, in Doha?
Limited to the space where you work, the region that you are, we have our socio-political limitations. So we don't have the freedom to work the way an American architect has. So our job is like a sailor who has low tide and high tide all the time. So we don't have a comfortable sort of a environment to deliver architecture. We can, we are very lucky if 70% of our work gets completed. There's so much interference because decision makers in Pakistan, their relationship with the professional architects is not comfortable, and with the consumers, the people at large is zero. Nobody's bothered about them. So in this sort of a environment, it is a very tough job to deliver anything reasonable. So we need to improve this socio-political, socio-economic and socio-political environment of our circumstances.
Maria?
Well, it's strange, how you would compare Doha to, or Qatar to Pakistan. I mean, we've had beautiful days being in Doha. It's almost like a sterile environment, everything clean, spooky, in order. The way the cars conduct themselves, just imagine the traffic at our end. So with a population of 30 million of Qatar and 26 million population of Karachi itself, there's absolutely no comparison. So it's humanity pitted against humanity. I also question how much of the profession, how much of architecture actually gets distilled to the masses in general, when we are actually practicing for the very elite or for the very few percentile of our population. And again, we go back to the three major cities, how much architecture makes its inroads, our planned architecture or planned city planning or urban works actually makes inroads to the other parts of the country. So it's a very difficult question to pit, to actually compare or explore the same narratives through so very diverse and different lens.
Well, I think your question, what would one advise or say to an emerging architect or an aspiring architect? I think I have a totally different response to two kinds of aspiring architects. The majority, by far the majority of young people who want to go into architecture as a career are coming from exposure, and by exposure, you don't have to be physically in Qatar to know what's going on in Qatar. It's the internet and it's global. Everyone is familiar with what's going on all around the world. And it's so amazing. Just look at the buildings we're in here, the museums, the city. It's so seductive, so mouth-watering. That's what I want to do. I want to... And for that aspiring young person, frankly, I have nothing to say. And then there's the occasional young person who comes into our office seeking appointments, and they come because they have seen the work we're doing, and they say, that's what we want to do. And my immediate response is, forget it. Don't even try. It's very difficult. You won't make money, you won't be famous, except for the wrong things. I think if by now, as you say, if I'm a recognized name, it's because I've gone against, I've broken all the rules, I've done all the things that one shouldn't be doing. It's tough. It's very tough. And that's my immediate response to these young people. Their hearts are in the right place, but they need to know that this is not a romantic, ride. This is a very, if they're not put off by that, then we allow them to come, let's see what you can do. Taimur is very much part of that. We have to educate, because the schools are not telling them any of this. It really is very difficult, but that is a role we recognize we have to play and be honest about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I should take the academic lens or should I take the practice-based lens, because both come from a very responsibility lens in the way that both carry a very huge responsibility. So academic perspective, the curriculum is completely, at least in South Asia, the way the architecture is being taught. That's where, I'm going to talk about, especially coming from the city that I belong to and the practice that's being taken over, is that it is very influenced by exterior. So whatever is being happening on the Western side, they want to acquire that. The desire to build in isolated atmosphere is the major priority at the moment. And that's where we keep on emphasizing whenever like students come to my office or the few people that practice in a responsible way, keep emphasizing that regionality is very critical. So you got to understand two major things. Where you're building, the region itself matters a lot because that comes with subdivision sections like climate, air politics, land politics, all of that. And then simultaneously next to it is materiality. What are you using? You're constantly importing material from outside, and that is for a limited time period. So I'm going to give a very vague example. The design that are taking place in residential atmosphere in Karachi is all for now. It's not for what's happening after 10 years. So the city looks very decayed. It looks infrastructurally as if the maintenance conversation is like something, a privilege. Maintenance should be part of the city, and you don't see that. And that is to do with the kind of architecture being produced. And that has, so for a younger person or a person who's entering into built environment, has to come with a lot of responsibility and think about architecture as something that needs to be in conversation constantly with the city or the rural grounds. In either way, what you're building is for not now, it's for the years to come.
You? I can't help but think of, if we began with Nayar Sabt speaking to socio-political aspects and narratives, the construction of the nation, the construction of boundaries and borders that on one hand define a nation and yet kind of withhold that space, if you will, to both Kamil Saban and Marvi speaking to the potential openness, the potential for revealing and exercising the respect of one another, the respect of the natural and built environment, but also the respect for each other. That is so fundamental, I think, to the ways in which we imagine, the ways in which we build as well. So when you speak, Marvi, to the degradation or the entropy of a Karachi today, I can't help but remember going to Mohenjo-Daro, for instance, 30 years ago, and remembering the fact that in Pakistan, you have millennia of city building, you have millennia of social building, you have millennia of culture building that is now degrading in various ways. So I'm wondering if you could, and I see you with your microphone, I was wondering if you might respond to these continuities in history in the way that you were just talking about.
I'm just going to quickly add on to that because this thought just came to my mind that yesterday I posted a picture of Arif Hassan's work with his apartments and with the drawing. So I took it in an angle that both were showing. I got so many DMs. People were saying, oh, we've lived here. Our parents used to live here. Or this is like a second generation. This relationship of built environment and coming with these archives of memories of what happened in the courtyard, what happened in the terrace, how the material was. Oh, we remember the terrazzo floor so vividly. I got so many these messages, which was nothing to do with, I just lived here, but really intimate details. That really strikes me that how the 70s and the 60s architecture played a role. And that was also this aspiration of maybe not owning or maybe owning, and then how that became like a family home. And moving forward from there, and what you talked about, like this history of like urban infrastructures like Mohenjo-daro taught us like what like sanitation is, and all of those things are there. But the problem is that there's a disconnect. The architecture right now, very few people are practicing by learning from what's existing. Everyone keeps on building independently. They're not taking cues from the grid. They're not taking cues from what is available, the available data, how the apartment infrastructure has grown from a humanistic scale to these high rises, which is isolated infrastructure. It disconnects you from the land environment. So all of these rhythmatic things that are happening in a very isolated methodology. And that has to do is because we are not in discussion with our history. We are not learning, picking up, analyzing, critically thinking, applying, and then developing. The developing is coming from borrowed initiatives from outside. How can we sell the best skylines? How can we sell uninterrupted views leading up to, like, let's say coastal development? Or how do I convert the agriculture lands into real estate housing systems? So all of this is coming from power capitalistic methodologies. So yeah, I mean, that's all. I mean, I have this what like a thought that came to my mind. Kamil Saab, please add on to that.
Kamil Saab, would you respond to Marvi's contention?
No, I know, because this is currently, I think, one of this at the center of my discussions and thinking, etc., is this very question of development. And I've been involved in development in the sense of as an urbanist, planning, and so on. And this catastrophe that I referred to, that we're all in the midst of, is, if there's one thing that you could put your finger on as the driver of this catastrophe, it is the pursuit of development. I mean,
In whatever form that might be, no?
well, not in whatever format, in the modern sense of development, which is measured in material possessions, acquisitions, having this, having that. So, and of course that translates power, because it's these possessions that give you power and so on. Of course, there was a very different notion of development before we set out on this suicidal journey. And that was nothing to do with having this or that, but of being a better human being. You measure development by how good a human. So that's totally, it's not a material, it's a spiritual, metaphysical, essential development. Essentially, we are human. How much have we developed as individuals? That's a totally different program. But no, we say that's just fantasy. I want this and I want that, and I'll measure my development by, and that is what is destroying us.
Perhaps development is desire, and desire at multiple scales often creates the havoc that we then have to contend with in various ways. And I was going to ask you, Maria, about the notion of desire in terms of your role as an editor and your role as responding to perhaps the desires of industry in Pakistan, but the desire of perhaps a populace that is seeking in some way what Kamil Saab is wanting, but perhaps not finding in the Pakistan itself, in the Pakistan that you are all responding to and dreaming about.
I will share with you a very small anecdote. There was a huge meeting called in by the government of Sindh prior to 2020, somewhere in, I think, even before 2010, calling for a huge master plan of Karachi. And the opening statement of the mayor of Karachi was the desire to be Dubai. And that's when all the architects actually stood up. And there was a whole hue and cry. Some of them walked out. Arif Hassan was there, and he was vehement. And so there were a huge exchange of angry outbursts as to how can you open the meeting with saying that you want to be Dubai. And I think today, sitting in 2024, that desire has extrapolated itself many-fold, many-fold. We are like unheard voices. I mean, I sometimes feel how many actually go through the editorial where I keep on talking about the same things, the same notions as to how we are absolutely raping the Mother Earth, how we are creating buildings individually with their own ecosystem, with no infrastructure support, and actually impinging on the existing infrastructure. And I keep going back to Arif Hassan as to this is happening or that is happening, and he being Arif being Arif, he says it will continue to happen. So sadly, what is happening today is architecture is being ruled by a mafia system, which is politically driven, which is real estate driven, developers driven, and they are actually creating our cities. We have stopped talking, we have stopped having our conversation on what our next master plan would be. Lahore, as Kamil Saab shared that, you all engaged in a master plan which is more humane, which came from the people itself, but will that make inroads and actually be actualized? Will we ever see that kind of a story unfolding in the city? We have yet to see that. Sadly, that's not happening in Karachi. It's too polarized. It has burst on its seams. The urban areas, the peri-urban areas, the marked boundaries, everything is so fluid. We are in Karachi, yet we are in Hyderabad, or we are somewhere between Hyderabad and Karachi. So that's what's happening, And the desire to be global, the desire to be seen as global, the acquisition of assets, it's like a never-ending story. And sadly, that's where we sit in. And that's why I initially said that absolutely we cannot compare Pakistan to Qatar. We are a developing nation, and we are such in a flux of developing that we are actually counter-developing ourselves in many folds, in many realms, as in environment, as in pollution, as in population. So there are so many stratas that needs to be understood to understand the build structure of Pakistan.
Nair Saab?
This is correct. We're dominated by the commercialism of, as she says, real estate is what dominates everything. And there is no R&D, that is, there is no research and development on materials. If you ask me, Lari, generally speaking, our engineering is all, in our engineering universities, outdated. Our technology, engineering technology is outdated. Haven't even worked on bricks properly so far. No research has been done. There's a research department in Punjab where the engineer has to be punished, he's sent there. You see, that's how we look at research. So we need to develop, it's like Ayurvedic is being developed against the big mafia of drugs in the world. We need to tackle construction itself as an industry and a technology with our own materials for our own climate and for our own culture and people. That is not being done anywhere. The critics look at design of buildings, that's all. They don't look at the material research in materials and technology. That's what is needed.
Please.
Just picking up on your thoughts on materiality. In the 7 decades of Pakistan, we have yet to come up with a true, affordable housing system for the exodus of population that we have in any part of the city, in any which way or through material language. So whatever work that Arif Saab must have initiated, and Yasmin Lari, of course, that has to travel and make inroads to the rural, peri-urban, and urban areas as well. So the research cell in architecture and construction methodologies is completely missing. So with that void, we really have to sift through what we have, what we should not have, and then only we can make a progression as to what is habitable and humane living. I don't want to use the word smart living, humane angle of living.
So with that, I would like to conclude just the conversation portion and open to the audience with a thought that in one way, all of you have shared not only the fact that humanity is at the center of architecture, of the built environment, of art production. What we haven't heard, though, yet, and perhaps with the audience participation, I'd like to think about potential. To think about potential not just as hope, but potential as an advancement in thinking with, responding to, reimagining, rewriting, perhaps, a history of the future that is not one of catastrophe, but one in which perhaps the non-human and the human are shared in a union, in a malap, of spatial and socio-political equitability. So with that, I would like to open it up to the audience for any questions. Thank you. So there is a microphone coming around.
Hello, my name is Nighat Mir. I've been listening to all this animated conversation going on. I completely agree. We come from a region which has great built-up structures in our historical past that we can learn from, but we refuse to learn from them. Here, two things are very important. One is absence of law so far as the built-up environment is concerned, and that contributes in a great way. And the other thing is the lack of professional integrity on the part of architects to stand up and say, no, this is wrong, I'm not going to build it. So maybe, I leave it to the experts, but I think that these two things, once there is a very strong built-up environment law, we will see great inroads. Another thing, this is what I want to ask Maria. There is a lack of, there's a crisis of identity in our built-up environment. What do you attribute that to? We're all living in mock Spanish villas and, borrowed whatever. Why is our architecture in this crisis of identity?
Well, the earlier generations were actually tackling with issues of regionalism, identity building, and actually trying to formulate an identity as well. Islamic ideologies, modernism, we have tremendous architects like Habib Fida Ali who worked on modernism. If you are talking about the current proliferation of works coming from the present generation, like I said, we are all attuned towards globalization. We are sitting in Karachi, but we are wanting to be in New York. And the client mind is also set in that way. The phenomena that we have in our hands gives us inroads to all kinds of visual data, and this is what the client is desiring and placing themselves. So it's a two-way situation where you are the designer and there is a client desiring to be somewhere else, and we architects catering to a certain number of population, building it as a profession. So I think there's a huge dilemma in here. There's a huge rupture in here when you're actually catering to a very small percentile and you're trying to make a living. And I'm really right now focused into the very younger generation whose work you see everywhere, and you kind of say, okay, I saw this there, and it's actually Instagrammable something. So yes, that is the case. And as for you saying palatial villas, that's a desire. That's an environment that you're seeking and you're building for yourself. And I would like to quote George. He's sitting here in the audience. He said, we sometimes have to dress and undress our clients to understand what they want. And maybe that's where the palatial houses, not housing, comes about from. And they are tremendous, and there are many, many in there. No doubt about that.
Thank you so much for such an insightful conversation. I'm coming from Egypt, and the similarities are striking. I mean, you can just replace Pakistan by Egypt, and everything is relevant in addition to other problems. And I think it's not only Pakistan and Egypt, but other regions in the world. As you were asking about potential, may I ask you, I mean, do you have any recipe or any plan for compromise while dealing with the urban developers or with the, not urban, but real estate developers and the governmental bodies? Because I mean, as you all mentioned, we are under the threat of just obeying what they are doing, and to make a living, we just have to, I mean, to do something which is controversial or even contradicting to what we are saying in the lecture halls. So in the morning, I'm giving a lecture about what should be done, and in the evening in my office, I'm doing something totally opposite, just to earn a living or to survive. So any clues about how can we do a compromise, just convince them, enlighten them?
I have a very funny story to share that in Islam, I was flying down into Islamabad, and a few years ago when one used to drive on the main road right after the airport, you could only see the mountains. Now you only see billboards, and left and right of that main road, everything is real estate housing. But what really intrigued me was Egyptian investment real estate housing coming from Cairo. I got really excited, and I was like, must be like Hassan Fatih's architecture, and it'll be quite incredible. I go inside, and it was like, my goodness, hotel, resorts, and the material was coming from Spain, and it was mad fancy. And it was an Egyptian investor, so we are also going through the same issue. There's no recipe for it. I think there's no cookbook solution to such infrastructural proliferation. But I guess the big thing is to advocate and to kind of put it out through documentation. I mean, that's like the kind of practice I work on, and that is to highlight these issues and to bring it forward, to talk about what's happening. And it's not just witnessing, but also analyzing and keeping a notification that how this is progressing into a violent act. And this is violence, whatever is taking place. If there is a solution, there is a carbon footprint to it, it applies. Will it deconstruct? Will it be broken down? Maybe not. But pushback of the civil society is very important, and it is critical in that system. So, I mean, we can have a longer conversation. There are some other people who are working on similar subjects, and we can have a conversation in the pavilion maybe, yeah?
Please, George.
Maria, when I said you have to undress the clients, I didn't know it will become a public recipe, so it was just a joke. Yes, thank you very much for this conversation. Maybe in order to be positive, because this is very depressing, I would like to speak about exhibitions and the importance of dissemination. When Camille speaks about going back to tradition, I suspect he doesn't mean traditional forms. What you mean is going back to the tradition of making good architecture for the people, for their well-being. And I think this is why exhibitions about certain periods, they were not the same in every country, but many countries found a good balance between the lessons from tradition and moving on. And the choice is not to go back in time because it's useless, it doesn't work anymore. But what is absolutely necessary is to transcend this bombardment of images through ArcDaily, through the internet and so on and so forth, these models of desire, and sit calmly and learn from precedents. And those precedents do not have a time, they don't have an age, they don't have a style, they are there. This is why exhibitions are extremely important. An exhibition like this, of course, as Maria suggested, that should be maybe encompassing more examples and so on, should be shown all over Pakistan and all over the world. And every exhibition we do, every publication we do has an impact. We underestimate its impact. The solution is not only in schools, in teaching, It's not only on the drafting table or on the screen today, it is in discussions, and those do not happen between architects unless there is an opportunity. Exhibitions, debates are opportunities. There is a way out. We're not all in the hole. Some people have been doing some good work that is making a difference. So I want to speak of this positive vibe that I get every time I go to an exhibition, and the connections you make, and even learning from bad precedents is good. But the question is, do we have time? I think architecture is something that requires time. We're in a time when speed is important. Once there was a colleague making a lecture about the importance of technology. So he took his phone from his pocket and said, now everything is fast, you know, with this iPhone. He was always ahead of us by 3 or 4 iPhone numbers. So he had the first smart car in the country and so on. So he said, he was praising technology. I can do a project on this, this toy. I can order my, my materials from China. They come by boat while I'm still designing, and the engineer in Germany does, I don't know. I said, hey, stop. If you want to do a good manouche, which is the Lebanese thyme pizza, I said it requires an oven. You cannot do it in a microwave. Good architecture requires time. And now we don't have time to do it. So what we need is to carve out time. And that's I think the art we have to work in. How do you carve out time with your client, with the decision making, and how do you carve a place? Yes, we have to be in places where decisions are made. We cannot be only receivers.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your talking. My name is Sami, I'm an architect, and I just want to mention something for your knowledge also, and something we can perhaps collaborate on. But I work here in Doha on a project where we're trying to promote traditional architecture and building. We work on a farm, a little bit away. I lead the architecture team where we're trying to promote mud brick, bamboo, traditional style. We work with craftsmen. It's an innovative kind of movement, very different to how Doha has been developed, as you can imagine. But we're getting a lot of interest from students who want to come and learn. So we're doing lots of outreach activity programs. And when students come, it really changes the way they think. They come wanting to be like Norman Foster and Zaha Hadid, but really once they start to learn how you make domes and you make basic construction, they work with our craftsmen. It's fascinating, the change that we have. So what I want to say is, firstly, I invite you, please, to come and visit our work and see what we're doing, and perhaps Aurelian can arrange a visit for you guys. And secondly, perhaps this is something that you could, I wonder how much connectivity there is between education sector and practice, because I feel that if you're going to inspire the next generation, there's got to be this movement at the grassroots level. So it's a really open question for you. Thank you very much.
What I find from just very briefly from the American perspective and in the university in a professional architecture program is that the desire for commercialization, for corporatization, and for making money from architecture is slowly, if not quickly, in certain cases, overlaying the production of ideas. And to George's point, where we end up finding time often is in a conversation like this, but also in conversations among artists and architects. And that when we find time to do that, we start to realize and perhaps acknowledge the fact that those are just one aspect of an architecture system, if you will, that is sometimes in contention with or in conflict with the very notion of building and what does it mean to build with and for each other. But I leave that very briefly to...
About what we can do, my response is very simple, because we've been through, after realizing what one should do and what one should not do, and mind you, I mean, also realizing that the central role and the importance of building and architecture and urbanism, cities, they are the biggest users of the earth's resources and the polluters of production of waste, etc. So, but having realized what's wrong and then what we should do, for many years we couldn't find a client who would agree to do what we, and their final question was, but has anyone built like this? I mean, do you want us to be guinea pigs? Why are you experimenting with us? But finally, the ice was broken, that we got one project, which was two Sufi tombs. And when they started taking shape, we could then finally say, yes, come and see. And I think invariably, without exception, anyone who went and saw that came back and, yes, could we have something like that? So no amount of preaching, proselytizing, telling you should do this, the only convincing argument is to do it.
And with that, I want to thank Nayar Saab, Maria, Kamil Khan Saab, and Marvi. Thank you very much. Go see the exhibition, and thank you.